All right, we are live. Coach Doug's here from the Barstow office with another Judge Doug's, Coach Doug's in the law room, pre-law. We don't know what we're calling it yet, but we have another attorney with us today, Mr. Paul Lesko. He's a licensed attorney in a bunch of different states. He is an attorney that collects sports cards, which is perfect for what we're going to be talking about today, the Giannis Greek Freak Leaf trading card lawsuit. Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, no, thanks for having me on. And also just to add there, not only do I collect cards, but for the last 15 years or so, anytime there's any legal issues having to do with cards, I make sure I either write an article about it or tweet about it or something like that, because I love how law and cards just correlate with each other and interact. And I think it adds to people's collections if they know not just the stories of the players, but also, hey, this card's kind of neat because it was actually involved in lawsuits too. So.
Yeah, because we have Giannis for the Milwaukee Bucks. Two-time MVP, Finals MVP. He has a Finals championship, Defensive Player of the Year.
He's the future of the league, and he's going to be here forever. So,
So we have him on one side and Leaf trading cards on the other, which used to be very big. They're still around, but they don't hold any licenses as far as any of with the major sports. But they make Pop Century cards. They make one-off non-sports cards as well. And so right now they're in a legal battle.
Yeah. So what you have is Giannis's, moniker of Greek Freak. Recently, he was able to get a trademark registration for it. I think it was about 2018, 2019. The trademark office has granted him the rights to that phrase for use with certain types of goods, mainly like jerseys and trading cards, things like that. But he has a very aggressive law firm that represents him. Really, if anybody uses the phrase Greek Freak without their permission, you could very easily find yourself in a lawsuit. There's over 50 of these lawsuits that have been filed in the last few years. And Leaf found itself on the receiving end of one of these lawsuits. And it's a pretty interesting story. So they came out with a number of cards. And you can see at the bottom, it says the Greek Freak collection. And these are the cards that are at issue in this lawsuit. What's interesting about it is in order to even have to make an appearance on a card, the company has to have a contract with the player to use their image, their likeness. I'm sure everyone's familiar with that, with NIL rights with colleges that's going on right now. But every card that you see out there by any company, they have a contract with that player to use their image. So amusingly here, Leaf did have permission to use Giannis's image. After these cards were released, they're 2020 cards, Leaf got sued earlier this year over use of Greek Freak. And Leaf's response is, they're baffled by it. They're like, what are you talking about? We have a license with Giannis to say that we can use, I think the exact quote is the name, image, likeness, comma, etc. for these cards. And the etc. And what's really funny is the plaintiffs here, Giannis's attorneys are here saying, no, that's only a license to use his likeness, not to use Greek Freak. And that's what this lawsuit's about. So really, if this lawsuit progresses, and it looks like it might, we will probably it'll be the first lawsuit that'll be a battle over what does the word etc. mean. Yeah. Does etc. here mean trademarks, nicknames, or does the trademark Greek Freak, does it need to be explicitly stated in the contract? It's from a legal perspective, it's fascinating because it just goes, it's probably a 2-paragraph, 1-page contract that you could tell somebody just put together really quickly. And those are the best types because there's always ambiguity. And if they lead to litigation, both sides can wholeheartedly argue their position. And I'm looking forward to that. I hope that's what happens here. Most lawsuits settle. I hope this one goes forward.
So he had a contract, Leaf did, with Giannis that said, hey, you can use my name, image, likeness, etc. We don't know what the etc. is. So basically that's what they're claiming. The etc. didn't include his trademark.
Exactly. That's exactly what they're saying with it. And whether it does or not, I mean, it's open to interpretation. And I think they should let a judge or a jury interpret it.
Can you differentiate the two? Can you separate Giannis from the Greek Freak? But then I could also see the same other side. If it is explicit to where it's trademarked and everything, it would have to be specific in the contract. I can see both sides to that.
Yeah, no, and I mean, it's just, yeah, to go to your point, it's kind of like, yeah, you've got the athlete, you don't have his art or his IP, you've just got the athlete, but he is so synonymous with Greek Freak. I mean, I don't think you see a broadcast of the Bucks playing without being mentioned the Greek Freak at least once.
Yeah.
So, I think when it comes to professional athletes, you kind of have to view them as, businesses themselves, because there is so much that goes into them that being an athlete, it's a full-time job. They don't have time to enforce their IP rights or do anything else to manage that business. So here it looks like you have an enforcement arm for Giannis's trademarks, that whenever they see Greek Freak, if it doesn't go along with the list of licenses they have, they just automatically either send a cease and desist letter or bring a lawsuit. So the lawsuit originally alleged that they didn't even have the right to use his name, image, or likeness. The complaint has since been amended, and it's solely focusing on the Greek Freak. So that kind of shows that maybe there isn't complete communication between Giannis and his enforcement arm. But although it started broader, it is now narrower just to the Greek Freak. And it looked like this lawsuit might go away because, I mean, really, what are we talking about here? We're talking about trading cards. Yeah. There's probably, I mean, are there maybe 5,000 of these made, 10,000 of these made, less for each of these cards? I mean, I went out as soon as the lawsuit was filed and bought 3 of them for like 99 cents each, So how much money are we even talking that's at issue here? So it looked like the lawsuit was heading towards a settlement. Much to our dismay, and much like what you were saying, we want to see the chaos. We want to see what happens. But 95% of all lawsuits settle before you even go to trial. So it looked like this case was going to settle. But then a awesome filing happened this week where Giannis's attorney said, hey, we were well on the way to settling this case. And then we come to find out Leafs printing more cards with Greek Freak on them. So we got to wake everything up. We got to do it all over again, Your Honor. So fingers crossed. Let's hope the chaos keeps going and we get something in this case.
But the contract that Giannis originally had, was that for a certain time period?
Yes. Yeah, it was for, so the contract that he had was explicit for it was signed in 2019. So it would have been explicit for the 2020 cards. And it was also explicit for 600 autographs to be included within that same product. So it was not a contract that was unlimited in time. It was certainly limited towards that product. Certainly, if there isn't another contract between Giannis and Leaf was printing additional cards, there could be other concerns there. But as I understand it, I mean, we haven't seen it in the court filings or anything. I believe Leaf and Giannis had another contract to produce additional cards. Now, whether that one had Greek Freak in it or not, they haven't, unfortunately, they haven't been attached yet. The first contract was, so, thank you plaintiffs for attaching that. Normally you don't get contracts attached to court filings, but thank you guys for doing that, because it's good to peek through and see the business side. And I'm always expecting these 20-page contracts with form selection clauses and everything else. And so it's great to see, hey, no, they're just, almost writing stuff on a napkin and saying that's good enough.
Exactly. Like a good old boy is like, it's good enough. Good enough.
Handshake deal.
Exactly.
No litigation. We know what we mean. There'll never be litigation ever.
Yeah. Who could foresee that happening?
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, okay, so there might be, there's probably another contract, and that's why they're still printing them. I know with sports cards, and there's a lot going into it. It's not just like a normal, hey, I'm going to print these off the computer. A lot goes into developing the card, crafting it and everything, and then actually making it and then shipping it. It's a long process. So when Giannis's attorneys came back and said, hey, we were close to a settlement, but they're still doing it, is this an issue of those cards were already in print, or, are they already distributed? How did they find out that, Leaf is even doing this? And why would Leaf continue to do that if in the middle of litigation?
Yeah. See, I don't know the answer to that one, because Leaf did release some 2022 cards for Giannis, and they have, so reading between the lines there is a contract between Leaf and Giannis to have the 2022 cards. I searched. I didn't see the words Greek Freak on any of those 2022 cards. So the fact that that Giannis's attorneys are alleging, hey, there's Greek Freak cards here, I don't know if that means maybe during the process, because it's a long process. You're right, because you have to secure not just the athlete's permission, but you've got to get the art. And the art typically is taken by a photographer somewhere. So you have to secure the art, get permission from them, pay them. There are so many steps. Putting it, numbering. I mean, it sounds silly, but even numbering the cards is something that's pretty important, because if you're going to have a full set of 1 through 400 cards, and all of a sudden 76, 79, and 83 are missing by the time the cards are released, you're going to have some, card collectors just flip out because where are my cards?
Yeah.
So since this lawsuit happened in 2022, was filed in 2022, I imagine that the process was going. I imagine there probably is a contract for at least his image to be on these cards. And then somehow the Giannis' attorneys learned that maybe some of these cards might have Greek Freak. Leaf didn't deny that they printed off cards that had Greek Freak. I just don't see them for sale. I would like to buy them if they are for sale, because I like to collect cards involved with lawsuits. And But again, it was, Leaf's defense there is like, we don't know what you're talking about. We have permission to do this. This is ridiculous.
And so in that sense, the fact that they possibly are still using Greek Freak as the term, could that be a defense on their side? Or at least that's them saying, we believe we were in the right to do it from the beginning, and we're not backtracking on that. We're not giving you that leverage.
That could go both ways. I think it goes to show intent that, hey, we think we're in the right. However, if they're in the wrong, then the exact opposite is made. Hey, not only did you infringe the first time, now you doubled down and you released another product. So it goes both ways. Whoever's the victor will be able to spin the yarn however they want it there.
Exactly, and it is surprising. We haven't heard anything from Leaf. I believe Brian Gray is the CEO. He's been very active on Twitter. He's, for better or worse, in certain recent instances of him talking about his soccer cards that he was making. He's usually pretty active on Twitter. So I guess maybe that might be his attorneys telling him not to say anything.
If his attorneys could get Brian muzzled, I would be amazed. I think it's more that I think Leaf has a good relationship. Again, separating Giannis's enforcement arm from himself, I think Leaf does actually have a good relationship with Giannis. Mm-hmm. I just think this enforcement arm is, so I don't think Brian wants to upset the apple cart that he has with Giannis. Yeah. But you're right. Brian normally is very outspoken. This year, you also had Leaf filed a lawsuit against CeeDee Lamb because CeeDee Lamb didn't fulfill his redemptions, which is basically he was supposed to have autographs in a 2020 product. He didn't sign them in time. The product was released, but Leaf included a redemption card in there saying, hey, submit this. As soon as the autographs come in, we'll get you the autographs. 2022 rolls around, we still have no autographs from CeeDee Lamb. So Brian Gray did, and Leaf, in this instance, he did bring a lawsuit against CeeDee Lamb. And within less than a week, the lawsuit was settled. The signed cards were not only in Leaf's possession at that point, but they mailed them out to their customers. Right away. And that was, pretty vocally shown on the Twitters. Brian actually, showed that. Said we're suing them. This is the first time anyone's ever sued an athlete for failure to comply with redemptions. And then when they came in, hey, look, the autographs are in. Looky here. They're all getting put in the mail. So, I would expect him if he had more of a tenuous relationship with Giannis, he'd be more vocal about this case. But I think Giannis and him are friendly. It's our lawyers. You got to deal with the lawyers.
Yeah, which is probably the same thing Giannis is saying. Mm-hmm. So that makes sense.
I've been fairly religiously filing all lawsuits in the trading card hobby since about 2007. And this holds the record from filing to settlement as the quickest lawsuit on record by a lot. So, but yeah, it's the first time a manufacturer held a athlete's feet to the fire to make sure they got the autographs. I hope it's a sign for the future since it worked out well, but I mean, there's so many other factors because you bring enough of these lawsuits, you may never have an athlete ever sign with you again. And time will tell if there's going to be any repercussions against Lee Ford. It doesn't look that way. Yeah. Pretty soon, once everything comes under the Topps Nini Fanatic, umbrella, you have one market player who has all the licenses there. They have a little bit more market power. So maybe they can, do something and maybe bring a lawsuit occasionally and keep athletes in line to timely fulfill their obligations.
Giannis's attorneys, they seem to be very forward and very aggressive in going after these people. Anyone that might use the term Greek freak, if they don't have the trademark. We had a guy that worked here who made a T-shirt, I believe, when he was in college, that said Greek freak. I think he made like $47, and they came after him. They didn't just stop at the cease and desist, though. With trademarks, it's my understanding it usually stops at cease and desist because you have to protect your trademark. You have to say, we went after, we protected it, we told them to stop, and it usually ends there. They still went after him. He had to settle out of court, and after for making $47 on a shirt.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's crazy to me. And so people say, oh, Giannis, this is just his attorneys protecting his trademark and everything. It's not on Giannis, but like it is on Giannis. These are his attorneys. If they're going after, kids making $47 on T-shirts, that seems a little over the top to me.
Yeah, and I think so too, because in my time as a lawyer, I've been a defense lawyer. I've also been a plaintiff's attorney. As a defense attorney, and I've done IP for both. As a defense attorney, we represent a number of Fortune 500 companies, and if you found a trademark infringer, someone on Etsy or someone that was making a shirt that infringed or something that was close, you'd send a cease and desist letter. If they stopped, you'd come in a little heavy-handed and a little bit of bluster. But if you got them to stop and never infringe your trademark again and agree that they would never infringe again, you would stop because that's a win. The whole point of a trademark is to separate your goods and services from everybody else out there. And one way you do that is by ensuring you have exclusivity. So just getting people to stop, that's good enough to show that once you have the big lawsuit, because you will always, at some point, you invariably will have the big lawsuit. If you can show, hey, I've shut down these 150 little infringers, I've protected these rights. Now, when it comes to the big litigation, that's, I've done everything I'm supposed to do. So as a defense lawyer, that's when we would stop. You stop the other company. We don't care if they're going to pay us. We don't care about the money at that point. We've got our win. You keep going forward. Now, I've also been a plaintiff's attorney doing copyright type cases for illegal downloads. We'd represent movie studios. And if somebody was illegally BitTorrenting, uploading the films that we had, we'd go and shut them down. Now, in those instances, you would typically go for a little bit of money because the lawyers there need to get paid. You don't normally go for a lot of money, but you just go for enough to make it worthwhile that we spent 1.6 hours doing this. We'll shut them down. That's the business model. Here, that's what it sounds like the plaintiffs are doing here. It's a little bit odd because, you have the big company, you're getting the big company, which is Giannis. They get the win by shutting the people down, but then they're keeping going to give their lawyers some money for it. And that's what we've seen in some of these cases. Sure, they're suing for a little, small amounts of money, $10,000 here or, not very much money, but they're also looking for their attorney's fees. And so you're showing that this is, basically a self-financed arm that can keep going on and on and on. And because of that, there's been some odd lawsuits that they've brought. There was one that I found where they sued a spice manufacturer for having a Greek freak spices. And really? While they won that lawsuit, the court did note that, well, your trademark doesn't necessarily cover spices. Yeah. Your shirts, your trading cards, your more sports memorabilia oriented. So they got a win. They shut that one down. But it goes to show you the aggressive nature of that law firm. Use Greek freak, you might be in trouble.
Because and like you said, I don't think the common person would not see a Greek freak spice and go, oh, this must be Giannis, the Milwaukee Bucks player's food spice.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's part of the trademark analysis is what is the likelihood of confusion for a consumer of these goods? And, if you're a sports athlete, if you see Greek freak on anybody else's card or any else's company, you think Giannis, that's Giannis. Yeah. But when it's a spice, well, Greece does have its own flavorings. There are people that really like Greek flavoring, it really could be a Greek freak flavoring that, might not actually infringe. It might just be a general description of some type of people. But you can see how when it comes to enforcement arms, especially for trademarks, you want to get to this ground where your mark is called famous. If your mark is famous and everybody recognizes it, at that point, you can really push outside the bounds of what you cover, like McDonald's. If you have a toothpaste called McDonald's, in all likelihood, McDonald's can sue you and shut that down because everybody knows what McDonald's means. Everyone knows McDonald's is the golden arches. And you probably look like you're trying. And if you see toothpaste, even that says McDonald's, your first thought is, hey, how does that go with the golden arches?
Yeah.
So part of this enforcement arm that they're doing is to make sure, let's shut down everything. So at some point we can say we're famous. We're a famous mark, and nobody else in the world can ever use the phrase Greek freak but us.
Yeah. And that's so that's where you want to be. And maybe that's where they're pushing with this litigation being so aggressive. Again, like I said earlier, where I want to see court cases go to the end. I don't want to see them settled because I like the drama. I also like the drama of, here's this, big time NBA star picking on these little guys who made $47 on a shirt. I kind of want to start some drama. And so I'm thinking of some ideas, how could I don't want to go to court, but I would love to get a cease and desist. And who knows, maybe I know a few people. My boss might, have unlimited money. Maybe, we could see the drama play out. So I'm trying to think of things that I could say that might include the term Greek freak, but be nowhere near. No one would think, oh, that must be Giannis. I want to have the Greek freak spice. Now, I'm a big fan of Greek yogurt. Not a lot of people know this. This might be news to a lot of people. I love Greek yogurt. It's one of my favorite foods. If I put I'm a Greek yogurt freak because I love Greek yogurt so much on a shirt, do you think I'd get a C&D from them?
So I'm going to preface this with the typical lawyer answer you get is, it depends. Sometimes, even if you have a legal defense, that won't stop the other side from sending a cease and desist letter or bringing a lawsuit if it's a close case. Here, you have an aggressive law firm that, if they're filing lawsuits for Greek freak spices, well, how much of a reach is it to go from spices to yogurt? And sure, you have that word in between there, but what's the important part? Greek and freak, they're both still there. It's 2/3 of your mark. So I could see an aggressive firm bringing that lawsuit, and it would be a very interesting test case. Now, I'm pretty sure Giannis's federal registration doesn't cover yogurt. It probably doesn't even cover food. So it's a good argument for you on that side. But you don't need to have a federal registration to bring a trademark lawsuit. You can bring a trademark lawsuit even if you don't have any type of registration. The federal registration just gives you a little bit, the presumptions are better in your favor. So it might be an interesting testing ground. I would certainly love to see what happens with it. But if I was a betting person, I'd say you would get a lawsuit. I'd say the lawsuit would probably last for about 18 months and then it would settle confidentially. We'll never know what happens after that.
Yeah. And then, you make a good point. It would, 2 of the 3 words would be, maybe I make yogurt like a much larger font size, so, okay. Yeah. It's, see, there's still Greek freak in there, but yogurt is like the focal point of the shirt. Maybe that'll make a difference. I don't know. I'm very interested in all of that.
I mean, I'm fascinated with it too, because Greek yogurt is just a general description of a type of food. Nobody can own Greek yogurt. That's out there. So the argument is, I'm just adding the word freak after Greek yogurt, and freak is just
Greek yogurt.
Yeah, that's basically it. So again, I like both sides. I think it would be a battle of the experts. You get your expert, they get their expert. You each spend $500,000 taking surveys of everyone in the country. I love this. Yeah. We got to do it.
Yeah, maybe just to add a little bit to it, I'll put Greek freak, Greek yogurt freak, etc. Just to add that etc. there. Let's see what the etc. includes.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining us. This has been, I mean, again, as someone who was pre-law at Florida State, I find all this very interesting, and it's definitely a mix of it's sports cards, it's the law, and so it's very interesting. I appreciate your time.
No, thanks for having me on. And if this lawsuit continues, I would be happy to come back on, and we can, especially when it gets to the point where they're each filing surveys against each other for what words mean, especially etc.
Exactly. That's perfect. Well, thank you so much. And we'll see you next time on Judge Doug's courtroom. We'll figure out what to call it, but this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Trademark pending. Thanks.
Trademark pending.